the Democrats are in freak-out mode at this point. Someone who may know a little bit more about that, joining us on the phones right now, Congressman Jodey Arrington here on the Chad Hasty Show. Congressman, good morning. How are you today?
I'm still inspired after listening to the president's speech last night, and I'm convinced that this man's going to be our commander-in-chief for 4 more years, and we're going to get a lot more stuff done that really matters to the American people. I loved his quote. He said, Congress, just remember, no victory counts unless it makes a difference in the lives of the American people. And boy, has he been relentless in the pursuit of that. And it's been an honor to serve alongside of him. I thought he just hit a home run last night.
You know, to me, it was the best speech that he's given, I thought. And I thought it was one of, if not the best State of the Union speech that I've heard. You know, it was a speech that should have been unifying, Congressman. There were things that should have been celebrated by everyone in last night's speech. What are your colleagues on the left thinking when they sit down for incomes being on the way up, for low unemployment? I know this is the second or maybe third straight year they've sat down during this, but it makes no sense at all. Why can they not celebrate the wins for this country, not just for the president, but for this country?
You know, it's sad. It's a sad commentary on the culture of Washington, but it's a terrible image for the Democrats. I mean, Nancy Pelosi's ripping up the speech in the sort of dramatic fashion that looks so petty and small for the stature of the Speaker of the House. These folks sit down folding their arms, and quite frankly, they're so consumed with hate for this president. And there's such many of them. I won't say all of them, but too many. I mean, that's game-changing for people who believe in liberty and limited government. These guys don't. Most of them believe that the government should take over everything: medicine, energy, agriculture, elections. So they're losing. And the reason they're losing is because the American people aren't buying it. And I think what we've seen and what people have tasted now, and they want more of it, and that's a reduced Washington influence and a renewed American spirit because of unleashed freedom. Freedom in the marketplace, freedom in our lives. The president touched on all of that, and not just the economic freedoms that have created this huge boom and this blue-collar boom that he spoke about specifically, but also defending our religious liberty, standing on America's traditional values, standing with the Constitution and rule of law. It's just, it shouldn't be something we have to convince people of, but it's those policies and that philosophy and framework for setting policies here in Washington that has created this great environment that sustained this land of opportunity and that has lifted the American spirit.
What was the reaction from your colleagues when they saw or heard about Speaker Pelosi ripping up that speech?
It's like you think we hit a new low with Brett Kavanaugh, and what happened to him. I saw him last night, gave him a big hug. Great guy. Ashley, his wife's from Abilene, by the way, and a longtime friend. That was a new low. And then all this sort of, politicization of everything in Congress, and then weaponizing impeachment. And you're just like, wow, we've just opened up Pandora's box, man, where we're going to see impeachment used as a political, weapon of political war going forward. And you think about the disastrous effects on the presidency and our republic. And then you've got Pelosi ripping up a speech on him. So I think everybody is just, I hate to use the word aghast, but you're in disbelief that this is actually happening with adults who were elected to uphold the Constitution, to love this country and do what's right and champion and cheerlead this country when it's winning. And people are winning. People are off food stamps by the millions. People have hope for a better future for their families. Family income's at the highest level ever. All these things, and you're ripping up a speech that the president gave, again, in dramatic fashion. It's just small. It's small. And I got to tell you, just on the political side, it's all these things. The Iowa caucus debacle, it just sends the message to the American people. And it's what Will Rogers said. It reminds you that some people shouldn't even be able to play with matches.
Are any of, you don't have to name any names if you don't want to, but are there any Democrats who were shocked by her actions last night? Because I know a lot of the Democrats just sat down the entire time and they didn't want to applaud, but have you heard from anyone on the other side of the aisle who is just shaking their head and going, that was a bad move from her?
I haven't yet. I will today. I'll be on the floor voting, and I visit with my colleagues on both sides of the aisle. And I've heard reports of Democrats saying that they were disappointed. But I can tell you it's more than disappointment. I can't imagine that at least half of them are embarrassed by it. Because, again, that's their leader, and it just reflects horribly on them. Because many of them, and I'm going to say this, there is a radical socialist agenda. It's being pushed by the left, and Pelosi is basically being controlled by that. But there are plenty of Democrats that are more centrist, that worked with us on a farm bill, worked with me on veterans reforms, that will work on infrastructure. And, they don't buy into this craziness, and they certainly don't buy into the behavior that we saw on display with Nancy Pelosi.
What was, and there were so many great moments, I know, but from last night's speech, did you have a personal favorite from last night?
Gosh, there were so many. I think about Rush Limbaugh, by the way. He was a pioneer in this, blazed the trail in terms of political commentary on the radio. No one has done it better or does it better. I don't know how much longer he'll be with us, Chad, sadly enough. So he was so emotional, and I was just sitting right underneath him. I even said hello to him afterwards. That was powerful to me, but you can't. I mean, I was choking up throughout the speech and the event last night. I mean, when the soldier came in, surprised his family, that was powerful. Probably to me, the most powerful was the story of Kayla Mueller and the humanitarian who was killed by al-Baghdadi and tortured, and how the folks named the mission, the operation for her and in her honor. It's hard to name one of them. I mean, that kid that stood up there, that's only son of that soldier who was killed in Iraq by the roadside bomb that was basically put there by Soleimani. Yeah. You scratch your head, though, when you see this. You put a human face to it, and you think, you've got bills in the United States Congress that are trying to tie the president's hand where he has to come back, even when soldiers are an imminent threat, and ask Nancy Pelosi for her permission to defend the safety of our men and women in the armed services. And it just makes absolute it's senseless. So very emotional, very emotional. But those are the times where you think, can't everybody stand up and cheer for the job these guys do and for the risk that they take and the sacrifices they make?
A couple more questions for you, Congressman, before we let you go. And I know you've got a busy day there in Washington, D.C. Can anything get done this year? I mean, just about everything the president said last night, Nancy Pelosi was shaking her head on last night and saying there was no way it was going to happen. Can anything get done this year, or is this just all it's re-election mode for everybody and that's it?
Well, I think it's going to be difficult. That's the reality of being in an election year with the president on the ballot. But here's the thing: the Democrats and many of my friends who are more, the common sense, moderate, centrist Democrats, they know that they haven't accomplished anything. USMCA passed. I'm glad it did. It's good for our country, good for our farmers in West Texas, et cetera. But that was passed because Pelosi needed the votes for impeachment. And the president's going to get all the credit for that, as he should, along with China and other trade victories. They really haven't accomplished anything. So I see them with great pressure on Nancy Pelosi and the Democrat leadership to say, we've got to get infrastructure. We've got to own something. We cannot be empty-handed coming into this with the wasted impeachment efforts, and nothing to show from a sort of a legislative accomplishment. So that's our only hope, that they're so desperate to show something for the time they spent in the House and leadership and in the majority. So I guess hope springs eternal. The one other thing I think we can do, and this is under the radar a little bit, in my role as chairman, co-chair with the Democrat on the task force for rural health care, there's a crisis there, and Richie Neal's the chairman, Democrat chairman of Ways and Means. He gave me this assignment. I take it tremendously seriously, and we've got to move something there, and I think we may be able to do that. So those are a couple things. Drug price reform is going to be another one. I think everybody feels a sense of urgency to get something to the president. It's been purely partisan at this point, but there's definitely a path forward if the Democrats choose to work with us.
Very good, Congressman. As always, we appreciate your time, and we'll visit with you. We'll visit with you down the road.
Chad, always good to be with you. God bless, and go West Texas.
That's Congressman Jodey Arrington here on the Chad Hasty Show, News Talk 95.1 FM and 790 AM KFYO.